On this week's episode of TalkStone,
we have our first 4 qualifiers for the Fall Championship as the HCT Fall Playoffs begin.
Sottle himself, Simon Welch, joins us in studio.
And as always, we present this week's well-played moment.
Everybody get in here. Let's break down all the esports action. Welcome to TalkStone, your premier source for all things competitive Hearthstone news and analysis. We have a special HCT Playoffs this week for TalkStone, where we're going to give you a breakdown of everything that you need to know from what happened at last weekend's Europe playoffs and preview what stories are to come for Asia Pacific coming up this weekend. I'm Frode. I'm joined by TJ and our special guest, Sottle. And it's going to be a really fun episode, I think, because it's rare that we get all 3 ACT casters on the show. Sottle, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great. I've struggled a little bit more this time with like time zones. We shift around all over the place. Like we cast Europe from a European time zone, and now I'm back on like North American mornings to come out and do this, which normally I'm fine with, but for some reason it's hit me a little bit harder this time. But we're chilling. I'm looking forward to recording some awesome TalkStone action.
That's right, TJ, and your son is now a couple weeks old. And
he's almost a month old. Yeah,
you're kind of juggling the most crucial prenatal period, or whatever the actual stages. I haven't actually studied, a lot of the birth process.
Babies.
It shows.
You're spending the most crucial moments with us.
Yes.
And casting. How's life, man?
Well, unlike Sottle, I don't know time zones anymore. Because babies don't know time zones.
Yeah, I immediately feel bad that I've just complained about lack of sleep, and you have a new baby.
No, it's been good. My son's doing good, so I was able to step away for a couple hours to record TalkStone today, and for a couple days over the weekend to cast some Hearthstone. But I'm looking forward to breaking down your playoffs, because it was a pretty interesting playoffs. And in the words of Hatul, who was a qualifier for the Fall Championship. Spoiler alert. I said spoiler alert after. That doesn't help. This tournament was weird. He said that in his interview.
Also a
in his
spoiler
winner's
alert.
interview. Also spoiler alert.
The tournament was very strange. Yeah, that's right. For people who are not familiar with the Hearthstone Championship Tour, there are 3 playoffs that we do in the West, and China does their own separate. Each playoff sends 4 players to the championship for each season, and then at those seasonal championships, summer, fall, winter, we also take 4 to the World Championship. And so Europe tends to go first due to visa concerns. We want to make sure that players from Russia or some of these other areas that are hard to get visas have as much time as possible. So they usually start things off. And as a result, they get like the blessing of being able to set the pace for the metagame. This is the biggest event since Boomsday has released. There's been invitational, a couple tour stops, but most players who've been keeping things tight to their chest kind of go out guns blazing for playoffs. So kind of what's our first impressions here? We had Sinto, Moyen, Renman, and Hatul qualify from a field of 87. It's one of the biggest, if not the biggest, playoffs we've had yet. So there's a lot of things we want to talk about. So what's the first thing, Sottle, that you want to talk about that comes to your mind?
First off, I think we've got a European field, maybe Sinto aside, that actually has something to prove going into championships. It always feels like the last few championships we've had, that Europe have had like the marquee players. They've had the favorites for the tournament. Whereas this time we've come up with 3 lesser-known players alongside Sintolo, who of course is a previous World Championship competitor. That's not to say that they aren't great players, because there's pretty much no one that makes the 39 points that you need to get to be able to qualify for Europe playoffs in the first place that isn't fantastic. But particularly Hatul was a challenger coming through and qualifying is a big story. But I think Sinto will be having to lead by example if we're going to continue European dominance at championships.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because I think we can talk a lot about Sinto, and what's actually kind of ironic that he took a step back from competing and grinding Hearthstone as much as he had, and as a result has been able to qualify for his first championship ever. Sinto's World Championship path last year was because of his last call points. He's never done well in playoffs. It actually kind of became sort of a joke or a meme amongst his group of friends and peers, is that Sinto always bombs out in playoffs, but his teammates always do really well instead of him. Instead, this time when he's like playing a lot of World of Warcraft and relaxing because he realized he couldn't really catch Hunter Racing points, he ended up actually going to the championship. That's a really funny story.
He even tweeted after. He said, "How did I qualify for champs? All I've been doing is playing WoW. See you in LA."
See you in LA.
He's the only one that was willing to admit it. Actually, everyone has just been playing WoW the whole time.
It's true.
The playing field was still even.
I'm even wearing my Warcraft shirt today.
Yeah, me too.
That's right, representing the skies of Azeroth.
Yeah.
One thing
nice.
that you mentioned in sort of your intro was that Europe has the blessing of being able to go first and set the tone for the meta, but is it a blessing or is it a curse?
I would say it's a blessing for people who can thrive in the environments of more of the unknown and the chaos.
Yeah.
Players that really like to specifically prepare unique lineups that don't really catch on early, and then people will start to copy them. I think they will flourish. You look at, like Hunter Ace likes to do his own thing a lot of times with his own team, or even just the Dusky boys in general. That's like Orange and all of them that practice with him, Crane. And then you have other people in NA like Muzzy who do that too. So I think it really favors them. But there's also a group of players who really like refinement. So they like to take ideas and then change like one or two things to give them the edge on more of an expected predictable field. So I would say that it depends on how the player is split, but I would say that it's give or take 50-50.
Well, I think maybe slightly more than 50% just by how many people ended up bringing Death Rattle Hunter.
Yeah,
Death Rattle Hunter is kind of the elephant in the room here because out of the 4 qualifying players, only one of them had Death Rattle Hunter.
Right.
Despite it being represented in over 50% of the lineups brought to the field. I think Renman was the only one, whereas Moyen had a Hunter, but it was the secret mid-range Hunter.
Yeah.
And Hatul had a Hunter, but it was the Spell Hunter. And those were not very represented at all. So I think Death Rattle Hunter kind of fell flat, and we'll probably see it brought less to the upcoming playoffs.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I think this is a particular metagame where I wouldn't have want to have gone first as Europe or as any region, because I think just the nature of the metagame right now, where there's theoretically like 3 kind of target lineups that you could bring, and we see them all, right? There's like the control target aggro lineup, there's the aggro target anti-control lineup, and there's the anti-control target control lineup. And all 3 of those kind of are circular and prey on each other. So if you're going first, you have the minimum information as to what the metagame's going to look like, and you just have to kind of take a shot in the dark. Whereas now, following up with APAC and then Americas, they can at least look at the percentages of what was brought, try and next level people on which are going to be the dominant strategies. But then, the one deck that just seems to stick out like a sore thumb is that Death Rattle Hunter, because it still seems very strange, like going into any of those strategies, that you'd really want that Death Rattle Hunter in there.
Because people put it in every strategy.
Yeah, they did.
They put it in control lineups, they take control and aggressive lineups, and it just seemed kind of weird. And one of the things about this playoffs that was different from previous ones, like from last year or even earlier this year, is that there's no one deck to rule them all. There's no deck that just automatically goes in every lineup. Maybe people thought it was Death Rattle Hunter, but it obviously wasn't. There's no Jade Druid, there's no Raza Priest, there's no mid-range Shaman if we go back 2 years.
Yeah,
so,
I do want to say 2 things about that. One is that as much as we say Death Rattle Hunter was represented, there's also a mixture of what kind of builds there were. Some were more like the traditional recruit that had like even Charged Devilsaur in it. And then you had some that were a lot more lean and mean and trying to hit a lot earlier curve. Some even playing some of the new cards like Fireworks Tech to try to activate their spider bombs and other different shenanigans. So there's a lot of disagreement amongst even what the Hunter builds are. And then you have Hatul bringing Spell Hunter with weird choices like Dire Frenzy, which is also kind of a little bit of a flooring choice to me because, that's inherently not a deck that you like to play minions in, let alone, copy.
TJ was mad.
He was it was a very strange choice, to say the least.
I don't know, I was quite upset. Hatul had a few interesting choices, and the Dire Frenzy, didn't work out for him in a few of the games that we saw on stream. But a couple of the choices that were a little bit odd in his Warrior deck worked out really well. He had a copy of Carnivorous Cube in his Odd Warrior deck, which is not something we see very often. And I was casting his match, and I was saying, what is this even for? And then he ended up just cubing giant... Well, he faceless
cave hydras, right?
Stealth cave no, they were corpse widows.
Corpse widows,
Stealth corpse widows. He faceless it, cubes, and then brawls the next turn, and he ends up with the big board that his opponent just had.
Yeah, it's so
really
funny
creative uses of it
because it discounts your own Death Rattles too.
It's weird because like Derek and I were sat backstage like listening to you casting the Dire Frenzy Hunter game. And we heard you say Dire Frenzy for the first time. You're like, what's this doing here? This doesn't make any sense. And Derek and I were like, oh, TJ, that idiot. He doesn't know that you can play Dire Frenzy in Subject 9 Hunter because you just draw your whole deck so quickly. And then we look up, it's like, oh, this is just Spell Hunter.
Spell Hunter.
We are in fact the ones that are the idiots.
So for people at home, they may not get the connection. As soon as you play Dire Frenzy at all, your Rockdalar and your To My Sides are not active.
Yeah, right.
Anymore.
Yes.
And so it's basically, if you think you want to get use out of those cards, a dead card until very, very late in the game.
Yeah, and not to mention that there's not even really good minions to use it on.
Right. He used it on a flanking strike.
Right. You can use it on the Wolf. You can use it on like an Unleash the Hounds charger.
Yeah.
But that's such a heavy investment for something that might happen later and still might not be relevant.
Now, we were talking about it a little bit on the ride back to the hotel after playoffs was complete. Pretty much the whole way home. And we were trying to figure out like what it's for. And I think he has so many tools in a lot of his decks that are very, very late game oriented. Archbishop Benedictus and his priest.
Yeah.
We talked about the Carnivorous Cube and the Faceless in his warrior, which are definitely late game tools. And the Dire Frenzy is probably there to help with fatigue matchups. You make a giant Zombeast with Deathstalker Rexar, one that you want multiple copies of, and you Dire Frenzy it and play these really long matchups against maybe a mirror matchup or Death Rattle Hunter or Control Warrior or something like that.
Yeah, except in those scenarios, and I actually played a game of Spell Hunter against Odd Warrior. I won just because I had the Raptor Patriarch just shuffling cards and Build-A-Beast. And so, like, that gives me anti-fatigue strategies. So there's even ways built into Deathstalker Rexar to help you do exactly that. So when I looked at Hatul's deck list, I thought it was kind of what I like to call the Raynad effect. You take a refined deck list and you put in 1 or 2 cards just to make it more challenging for yourself.
Well, so challenging is the word, right? Because Hatul is qualified as a challenger out of this, and I think that probably goes to speak a little bit that he's not fully invested and fully poisoned maybe by the pro community who kind of all have these same circular ideas about what's right and what isn't. Now, I certainly disagree with a few of the cards that he's used in his decks, but it goes to show that he's coming in with fresh ideas.
Oh yeah, and I think if Hunter Race did that, we'd be like, wow, he's a genius. I mean, not necessarily, but like the idea is that these kinds of ideas have existed. Remember when was it Doc Rivius put Ironbeak Owl and Prince Tal'Daram in his deck list and still somehow?
Yes, I do.
So
you got second place at what was that, Taipei?
I think it was Bangkok, perhaps.
Bangkok, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Bangkok,
so
yeah.
Either way, I'm just saying that there's very interesting, unique ideas out there that obviously seem really bad on paper, but in practice still end up working out. Is it because or in spite of it? Well, I guess we'll never know.
Unless he brings the same exact lineup to Fall Championship and has Dire Frenzy in his Hunter list.
He doubled down.
Bigger sample size.
2 Dire Frenzies.
I mean,
let's go.
If there's anything that we learned from his interview that you conducted, TJ, is if we were to ask him, he would be more than happy to explain at length why Dire Frenzy is in his deck.
I knew almost nothing about him other than he came from the Challenger circuit.
Right.
He organizes a lot of local fireside gatherings.
And the only people really know that's prominent from Israel is Glacier, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just really cool to see another player be put on the map there. It's kind of like something you mentioned. Challengers don't really go very far. We've had Deep Hackman get to a top 8, but outside of that, we always kind of cross our fingers and hope that the path to pro is laid out for some of these guys. Because I think that's one of the interesting things about Hearthstone is that you can walk in and you can challenge some of the best guys and not have a 0% chance to win.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what makes it alluring for some of these people to always try their hand at competing in Hearthstone. But yet, we haven't had many people be able to have success like that.
It was Snail, who made it to a regional championship for Americas, only finished 5th, 6th. So if we equate that to the system now, he wouldn't have even qualified for the championship. But he ended up going on to qualify for playoffs through points. After that, he played on the Argentinian Hearthstone Global Games team.
Yep.
So he's kind of like the shining star of the Challenger circuit. But we have yet to see a player really just make that path to pro ascension from Challenger, where they just start and then go all the way to the top. And Hatul is the player that's positioned the best to do it. I learned a long time ago to never have any expectations going into a winner's interview. And it always seems like I get the I want to call them the weird interviews, but I'm going to call them the cool interviews.
Sure.
Because I love Hatul now. He was not afraid to speak his mind, not afraid to just interrupt me and say,
the nickname is Hatul. That's how you pronounce it. Now you go.
And I'm looking forward to interviewing more in depth when we get to Fall Championship.
So I still haven't heard that interview because myself and Derek were like stood in the wings waiting to replace you as you were conducting the interview. So all I got to see was like your reaction to what he was saying. And just from that, I already know that it was like a top tier interview.
Yeah.
It's great. It's great. And yeah, so again, I think if you guys are looking for, like a people's champ, so to speak, to root for and champ at the Fall Championships, you definitely look at Hatul. He's a challenger representing the amateurs. He's bringing his own ideas, and he's a very fun dude. So this guy's a triple threat. We'd love to have him, and I wish him the best of luck. Very quickly, let's talk about the other guys. I think one of the interesting also trends that's happening is practice partners and how they tend to do well, but specifically the German practice partners.
Yes.
We had Bunny Hopper and Viper do very well, but now we have Moyen and Sintolol, who are part of the Deutsche Soccer Gilde practice group that just like to help each other. And then you even saw the camaraderie when Sinto lost to Moyen for one of the qualifying spots, and Sinto walked over and hugged him and immediately congratulated him.
That was my favorite part because like I thought, Sintolol's quite openly angry on camera a lot of times. So like he lost.
Some would say
he lost the game. He stood up. He took his headset off, and I was like, okay, here we go. And then suddenly he just appears in Moyen's camera on the other side to give him a hug. I was like, you know what? That's kind of heartwarming.
But Moyen is a name that we've been hearing for a while. Also, he had a little bit of something different in there, whereas Sintolol had the aggressive lineup with Agramage. Moyen had the aggressive lineup with the Subject 9 Secret Midrange Hunter with the early Beast Curve as well.
Yep, great deck.
It turned out to be a great deck. I think it's one of those...
Control Hunter. Credit where credit's due.
There you go.
I just picked the wrong guy, man. I was feeling the Secret Hunter. I felt like that was a genius choice, and I specifically even like the deck list of 30 cards that Boar brought too, because I think like small additions like Bear Shark were a really good call for that weekend. And he was even tweeting that he didn't regret bringing his lineup. So I think it's a really good choice. What do you think about Redman's lineup, TJ? The fact that he brought Q-Block in a field with his all
this guy.
Here we go.
So Frodan before the tournament was like perusing the deck list, like I need to pick someone who has Q-Block. I need to pick someone who has Q-Block.
Specifically, I said I want to pick someone who has Q-Block but doesn't have Quest Rogue.
That doesn't have Quest Rogue. Because Frodan thought that Q-Block was a deck that was very slept on and that was going to overperform from people's expectations because the reason you gave was because of the lack of weapon removal in the current meta for Skull of the Minari to just wreak havoc. But Redman was, I think, the only player that actually performed well with Cube Warlock, but it was a very small sample size.
Yeah.
So.
I think
did it get banned too?
It did get banned a lot.
Yeah, so it's like it didn't even necessarily perform well. It could have just bombed out.
A ban is a win, right?
It is a win, but it's like the times we saw Q-Lock on stream, it struggled a lot, even in matchups it's supposed to be good at.
Yeah.
I think it should, in theory, be a decent call, though, because as I was talking about earlier, it was such a split meta where you can't really hard target anything, so it's such a variation of different decks that, when you're playing the Infinite Doomguard deck, you have pretty good matchups against Control. When you're playing the Defile Voidlord deck, you have some decent matchups against Aggro. Well, guess what? Q-Block does both of those things in one go, so it seemed like it was well-positioned against a good chunk of the field.
But you don't get to choose which one of those you get to do, right?
You don't.
And that ended up being the big issue from the matches we saw on stream was when he needed to play aggressive, or I can't remember who the player was that we saw early on in the day that got just 3-0 swept.
Was it General?
It was General.
The guy that
Your actual pick?
His actual pick. Admirable and I cast that match, and the thing about playoffs is that the casters get a rotation of which matches we're casting. And it's kind of luck of the draw whether you're casting for 10 minutes, like me and Nathan were in our first round that we cast, or whether you're casting for 2 hours, like Dan and Derek casted Silvers versus Hunter Ace. And so Nathan and I were just sitting around doing nothing, and we walk up on stage, cast 10 minutes, be like, whew, tough work, and then go back and sit around for another hour and a half.
So the first 2 rounds, so Raven and I opened, and we had like a control mirror for the main feature games. We probably did like an hour and a half, and then the fill was quite short after that. Then you guys came out for round 2, did your 10-minute series, and then it was Raven and I again to fill the entire second round. That
was really fun.
For like 2.5 hours. We did like 4 of the first 5 hours of the broadcast.
And then poor Raven got sick. Hope he feels a lot better for this weekend. You did bring up one last name, and we can wrap up perhaps the Europe Fall Playoffs with this. Hunter Ace went 6-0 and was able to go on top of the Swiss standings going to day number 2. And then day number 2, he didn't win a single series.
Nope.
What do you think happened? Is that just kind of how Hearthstone is? Is that kind of like maybe his lineup was doing very well on the high variance side in the first day? Or do you think perhaps just bad matchups, unlucky bracket, etc.?
He had Sinto in his group, first and foremost, who's got like the most recklessly aggressive lineup in the tournament with Aggro Mage as well, and Hunter Ace is primarily playing anti-control, so that's just a bad matchup for him right off the bat. And then when he fell down into the lower bracket, I believe he had to play a functional mirror match in terms of
Playing
lineup.
against Silvers.
Yeah,
but
okay.
he's pretty favored because Silvers has Odd Warrior, and that's kind of like the control deck he wanted to beat.
That's
a lot.
fair. Yeah.
And yet he still lost to him too, so
Right.
it didn't actually work out. And that was a rematch from the crazy match that they had earlier in the Swiss portion.
Yeah, Silvers was a toss-up if he was ever able to take a game with Odd Warrior, right? So it's kind of tough to put all your eggs in that basket when it's a mirror matchup outside the Control Warrior. And Control Warrior can do some crazy things. Odd Warrior can do some crazy things with being able to, kind of have that X factor of Omega Assembly later on in the game. And
Yeah, it's hard to comment on what happened when we didn't see the
We didn't
series,
see it,
we didn't
right?
get to see it.
but I can imagine how it unfolded.
Yeah, well, I mean, what we did see is the first series where Hunter Ace plays against Silvers, and after that series, Hunter Ace tweeted that he didn't feel like he knew those matchups as well as he should have done, and was, kind of apologizing for that to his Twitter followers because of the high standards that he holds himself to. So I can only guess in the end that came back to bite him.
But Hunter Ace, with his top 10 ladder finish in August and the points that he earned from playoffs and being top 8, first 2-star master.
Yeah, another star for Hunter Ace.
And judging by his pace, he'll be the first 3-star master pretty shortly.
Yeah.
Give him a couple more top 10 ladder finishes in the next few months.
And on that note, there's 5 or 6 people who are pretty upset that Hunter Ace did not qualify for a championship. Casey and Fino and all the people that are chasing him down in points.
Yes.
Because if Hunter Ace were to qualify for the World Championship through a seasonal championship, that suddenly throws the last call wide open again. And I know there's a couple of there's one particular tour stop coming up that Casey wasn't planning on going to, and then after day 1, when he saw Hunter Ace 6-0 at the top of the Swiss, suddenly in our complexity chat, it's like, maybe I should be going to this tour stop now.
That's funny. That's funny. That was kind of like what happened with Tom 6 at T9 last year. He was the points leader by a big margin in APAC, and he was like 1 series away from qualifying in summer championships. And all of like APAC's like 2 through 10 players, because they were all within 5 points of each other. 2 through 10.
I think Shaxi was had a few points.
Aqua was really high up too, and just. Even Ping Ping Ho was in the race. It was really funny because all of them were like, "Yes, go Tom, go Tom," because they all wanted a chance. But then Tom lost, I think, to Orange, and then didn't make it. And then he became our world champion. Oh well.
Yeah, no big deal.
So overall, that was pretty much everything that we want to talk about when it comes to HT Europe. Is there one thing you want to say?
There's one more thing that I think we have to talk about the Europe playoffs.
Okay.
Dan's outfits.
Yes.
What about my outfits?
I hope that when we actually air this podcast, we can just have a montage of Dan casting throughout the weekend with his outfits. I particularly liked the bow tie suspenders and short sleeves.
Yeah, it's like Wolf of Wall Street.
Yeah, it was I think it was a refreshing change from the crazy jackets, because everybody expects the crazy jackets now, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And then you just go do a complete 180.
Yeah.
And
I'm going to try to do that for most of the season. Just try to, do a different style.
I cannot wait until the very end of the 2018 HCT season where what your outfits are going to evolve into.
I don't know either.
What just made it look particularly choice is that Frodan was casting with Derek this weekend instead of his usual casting partner, and Derek has the most vanilla wardrobe out of any caster. So then he's just grey blazer, white shirt or something, and then he's just sat next to Dan, just like okay. Just feels like there's an actual split screen. Like these two people do not belong sitting next to each other in any way.
This is a special playoffs exclusive episode of TalkStone, so we won't have an edition of Meme History. But I hope that one day down the line, one of Dan's outfits from this weekend will make it onto Meme History in some capacity.
I don't understand how. It's actually just good fashion, in my opinion.
It is. But for people like me who have zero fashion sense, I mean, I wear a T-shirt and shorts to work every day. And my fashion sense on broadcast is just a brightly colored shirt with a tie every single time with rolled up sleeves.
You're getting better. They're color matching very nicely, and they bring out your
100%
eyes.
credit to my wife. Because I would not be able to dress myself in any possible way. I don't know if you remember back in the day in Legendary Series, I used to wear plaid flannel shirts to cast.
No way.
I did, yeah.
Like
I was
Ben Brode?
like Ben Brode, but not intentionally like Ben Brode. It was like looking in my closet. Ooh, plaid flannel seems like a great choice for broadcast today.
Huh. I didn't know that. I always thought it was just blue and red shirt. That was like your thing.
Blue, red shirts, and if you go further back, plaid flannel.
I think I did cast with you for about 18 months before I saw a 4th shirt.
Yeah. Now I have like 8, so I'm moving up in the world. But I think also one of the things I'd like to do is just to coordinate with you and match you.
Sure.
So maybe
you're going to wear suspenders and a bow tie?
Yes.
Okay.
Just because of the contrast between mine and Dan's body type, which I don't need to explain what they are. I just think that kind of clash would be pretty funny.
It would be very amusing, but as you know, TJ, casting is pay to win when it comes to fashion. So hope you're ready to bust the wallet out.
I learned that. Long time ago.
Is it time to pull back the curtain on where all of Dan's clothing actually comes from? How much it really costs?
You'd be very disappointed when I take you to the local thrift store and find out what ends up happening.
Ooh, look at this bow tie. 25 cents. That's a steal. All right, now we can wrap up Europe playoffs.
All right, so
Sorry,
Europe
just had to get that out
playoffs finished up this past weekend. Coming up this weekend is Asia Pacific playoffs. But before we get into that, let's talk about the well-played moment, TJ.
And now it's time for the well-played moment. I'm contractually obligated to say that every time.
I was going to say, do we not have a sting for that? You just have to do it live?
I have to do it every time.
Oh,
We're
wow,
supposed
okay.
to have like an actual paper cutout of the emote so that we hold it up and it becomes even more campy in case you
I'm pretty sure it's on my desk and I forget to bring it every week.
Yeah. So for this week's well-played moment, we're choosing Hunter Ace versus Silvers from the third round of Swiss. We mentioned this earlier in the show, a little bit about that series. Specifically, Game 5, the Togwaggle Malagos hybrid Druid mirror. What was going on with that, TJ?
This was a weird game. I think both players were not drawing the best. They weren't getting their combo pieces till later. They were all waiting for one more piece. Hunter Ace had a handful of cheap spells with a twig loaded, so he was waiting for Malagos, whereas Silvers had the cheap Azalina, but like no Togwaggle. So it was kind of like this awkward back and forth where both players were waiting for the right time to go off. And then Hunter Ace sees the double Dream Petal Florist come out. So he sees the first full 7-mana one come out, and that one hits the Floop in his hand. So then the next turn, Silver plays the other one, and that reduces the Azalina cost in his hand. So then Hunter Ace realizes that he played it twice in a row. There's really only one thing that he could want to reduce the cost of that much, and that's Azalina. So by knowing that his opponent has a 0-mana Azalina in his hand, he very slowly spots the fact that he could go with his own Azalina and go for a near infinite chain of Azalinas plus naturalizes to fatigue Silvers to death from 50 odd health.
Yeah.
And the thing about this is it's not the most well-played moment, because this interaction is something that can occur in Togwaggle mirrors and is something that experienced Togwaggle players know. But the thing about it was that Hunter Ace even admitted himself that he didn't have much practice with this deck. And you can actually see him sort of figure this interaction out on the fly, despite not having played the deck very much.
Yeah, there's a couple of things that you could argue were potentially mistakes in the matchup. For Silver's side, I actually don't blame him too much, because if you rewind to the start, like he actually got, I think, his Malagos and his Togwaggle burned off naturalizes.
Were
so he's scrambling for some kind of miracle win condition. But conventional wisdom would tell you that you don't want a 0-mana Azalina in your hand in this matchup, ever, because this can happen to you. And actually, because of perhaps Hunter Ace's inexperience in the matchup, he actually lets a whole turn pass with that 0-mana Azalina in Silver's hand, and Silver's then fails to take advantage of that. He doesn't throw the 0-mana Azalina out just so Hunter Ace can't do what he ends up doing. And as you said, what he ends up eventually figuring out is that he can loop naturalizes forever, even because he's a little bit slow. He ends up roping, so he even finds a way. He even finds a way to like maximize the amount of burns by not looping Azalina again. He like spreading plagues and naturalizes his own spreading plague just to get maximum burnout. Hunter Ace is just like a fantastic intuitive player. He just works things out fantastically quickly.
Yeah, and I think Silvers was kind of playing for that moment that Hunter Ace ended up winning the game for, because even with Malagos and Togwaggle burn, you can still find ways to win that matchup because of this interaction we just saw. So normally you'd say, oh, my Malagos is burned, my Togwaggle's burned, a lot of matchups you're like, I don't think I can win. There's just that too much of a deficit. But he was waiting for that kind of moment to go off, and then realizing that I didn't play my 0-mana Azalina. Hunter Ace found the interaction, got the not infinite Azalinas because the naturalized still costs 1 mana, but enough to where it's impossible for him to come back from that scenario because he's too far into fatigue.
It's still 100%
it doesn't have Togwaggle.
Yeah. The problem, even if you don't kill them in one turn with the fatigue, both players now have a 0-mana Azalina in their hand for the rest of the game. Right.
Yeah.
So, like, if you get so far ahead on the fatigue ticks in your turn, there's no way that the opponent is going to catch up. So you just win every single time.
But not a traditional well-played moment like in the past weeks that we've had, because it wasn't some crazy play that he made to win from an almost unwinnable situation. It was just the fact that Hunter Ace, a player who wasn't practiced on this deck, found a really cool, unique interaction and took advantage of maybe one small slip-up from Silvers that allowed him to win the game. And it was flashy.
It was very flashy, and it's funny to me because Hunter Ace says that his favorite streamer is Disguised Toast because he loves watching memers and ridiculous decks. That's right. He doesn't like watching, like Zalay and Crane. Some of the other guys were like more
because
hardcore.
He can't watch himself because he's the top level.
Right.
So just like watching people that aren't quite as good as you.
I feel like when you watch guys like Toast, Crip, even Firebet had a YouTube video of this exact interaction. Hunter Ace should know better than that to understand this interaction, but at the same time he didn't. And that happens to some of even the best players in the world, or in many people's opinion, the best player in the world. And yet he's figuring it out on the fly. And I think that's just a different display of skill that we don't usually get to see in Hearthstone, which is spontaneity, chaos, and being able to figure out a line through all of that.
Yeah.
And that was, in my opinion, that's a really cool, well-played moment.
Yeah, and one of Hunter Ace even tweets sometimes about how he learns so much just from playing games throughout the tournament. It was like he was evolving at the decks that he was playing during playoffs.
That's so scary.
It is, because it's not something players do a lot. A lot of times players will even intentionally not go and review their games.
Right.
So that way they don't get in their own heads.
Yeah.
And they value the preparation beforehand the most and say, well, I know these decks as much as I'm going to know them, and now I just have to perform. Whereas Hunter Ace looks at every opportunity, every match, as a way to improve his own play at the decks that he brought. And that is, like you said, very scary.
He's just an adorable Norwegian self-learning AI, essentially.
He is Deep Blue.
Yeah, right.
So because of how flashy it was, because of the natural spontaneity and being able to improvise a really cool play, we're choosing Hunter Ace's victory over Silvers as our well-played moment.
Nice.
Nicely
executed.
Smooth.
Yeah. You know what else is nice? This promo. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Hearthstone Championship Tour's next stop in Seoul, South Korea.
Teams in Hearthstone are more important than ever, even in an individual game like Hearthstone.
Muzzy, Amnesiac, and I are on the same team. Muzzy crushes North America. He's been the point leader for 2 years in a row already. He's not going to get third year in a row without a fight.
All right, so we have the Asia Pacific playoffs coming up this weekend. Very interesting for many reasons. One of them, of course, is the underlying growth of how Boomsday meta is going to continue to evolve from week to week. So Europe set the pace. How will Asia Pacific adapt? I personally love Asia Pacific because I think they are the most willing to take risks out of any of the regions. Wacky Packy. And then, I think some of these players that are coming this weekend haven't disappointed, DJ. Who are you looking at to start things off here?
Maybe not anybody specifically. If I had to choose someone, it'd probably be Rivius.
Doc Rivius, my man.
Who brought a double Mechathune.
Yes.
On lineup. He brought Mechathune Warrior and Mechathune Druid.
He brought both Mechathune Warrior and Mechathune. Mechathune, first of all, is already kind of a question mark, but you're bringing two of them.
Yeah.
And not even the classes that are supposedly the best at it. Like Priest and Warlock are even the ones that are playing more consistently. Druid and Warrior, I mean.
It's so he's guaranteed to play one if one gets banned.
Yeah, I mean, what's the point of
That is
bringing a
some
meme if
galaxy
your
brain.
opponent can just ban your meme?
Yeah.
You got to double down on your memes.
Yeah, but not to talk about him specifically for too long, because we're talking about Asia Pacific playoffs as a whole. We looked through the deck list. A lot more Priest.
Yeah, Priest, big jump here.
Probably in reaction to a better matchup against Death Battle Hunter than most other decks that fit a control lineup.
Yep.
2, a lot more Subject 9 Hunter, the Secret Hunter. As a inclusion in the aggressive lineups, we're seeing some players cut like Odd Paladin. We're seeing some players cut Aggro Mage, but we're seeing a ton more. I think there's probably more Subject 9 Hunters than Death Rattle Hunter in this field. We don't have the full statistics since we just got deck lists like 10 minutes ago.
Yeah, we actually just browsed through it right now.
Yeah. But just some really cool evolutions.
Yeah, and I think you can see that these players are going on a little bit more data than Europe had, right? Like, for example, Dagrivius, he has the read that people are going to say, well, aggro did very well, so people are going to bring control, therefore I will blow up your control deck with my Mechathune deck. And that's not a read you can really make unless you've seen someone already set the pace like Europe did. So what Asia Pacific have been able to do is make more of a clean read on the strategy they want and also bring slightly more refined decks, which is where things like that Subject 9 Hunter, which, unless you've been specifically watching Ball Control stream, came out of nowhere this weekend at Europe Playoffs.
Yeah. Another deck that's also gotten a little bit of surprising resurgence, like a shot in the arm, is Even Shaman. I felt like I've seen a lot of people brought Even Shaman with some of the new cards like Arcane Dynamo and other like weird tech in there. Do you think it's actually going to do well this weekend?
I don't think so. I don't think it's consistent enough against other aggro lineups because it's supposed to, right? Because it's a board centric with early game swings and Flame Totem. It's supposed to be good against the other aggro lineups. It's supposed to be one of the aggro-ish decks that gives you a better chance against other aggro lineups. But I just don't think it's consistent enough at what it's supposed to do to make that happen. Now, of course, Sea Giant's still a great card. The Mercspark Eel, still a great card. Flamestone Totem will always be a great card. But it just needs to get to that point, and I think the other aggro decks just do it more consistently.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I don't think even Shaman has enough of an edge in those aggro matchups now to make up for just that, how much weaker it is at just smashing open like some of the anti-control decks, right? Like some of the slowest decks can afford to wait out even Shaman because it doesn't do much for that long of a time.
Yeah, I always firmly believe that even Shaman's performance on ladder is largely because of people's surprise factor. And even then, it's not actually as good against the aggro decks as you hope it should be. And then you also combine with the fact that on Boomsday, most of the cards that it got are like late game centric stuff that people aren't really like sold on, like Arcane Dynamo.
Right.
So it doesn't even necessarily play into the strength of the deck, which is being very fast on the board. It's like late game value with Hagatha, the Lich King, Arcane Dynamo. So people are playing Rune Spear. It's just like at that point, it's like, are you just playing like a slow mid-range deck as opposed to the fast tempo deck?
And then why not just play Shutterwalk?
Right.
In order to have those guaranteed wins against the really slow decks. And not have your board get
Did we see a single Ike Shaman in Europe, or from what we looked at in APAC?
I think there was one mid-range Shutterwalk Shaman in Europe, but I didn't see a single one in Asia Pacific.
Now, so I think it was Ike and Crane tweeted that off-stream they have a ton of success with the deck. But then if you watch them play it on-stream, they don't. And then if you watch other players play it, they don't.
Yeah, so if you watch me play it off stream, I don't.
So
if you don't want me to prove this in any way, I have 100% win rate with that deck.
Yeah. It seems like it's got all this hype around it because it does have some things that it can do that are nuts.
Yeah,
probably revolved around Unstable Evolution or just Keleseth on 2. But almost every deck, every archetype, or every class, you can find a way to put Keleseth in and just nut draw someone and beat them in a spectacular fashion. You can do that with every class almost. Shaman, of course, not excluded because of the deck. But I just think that for what it's trying to do, the normal Shutterwalk Shaman is what you want to fit in a cohesive lineup. Maybe the mid-range one could be better suited on ladder when you don't know what your opponent's going to be. You want kind of those multiple ways to win the game. I just think in a tournament environment, the combo Shutterwalk is
Well,
much better.
No matter what, I think what the important thing that I'm taking away is that the bottom 3 classes, the quote bottom 3 classes in Shaman, Warrior, and in Priest, all kind of got a significant bump in numbers, and at least in representation. So I want to see if that can upset a little bit of the balance, because I feel like Hunter was very overrepresented for what it was doing, but yet it still performed decently well. We saw 3 out of the 4 top in Europe still have Hunter, even though they're different variations, which also speaks to the class's viability right now.
Yeah, I think we're going to be seeing just how good the Subject 900 can be. I think that deck is going to overperform based on people's expectations, especially after seeing the rest of the field. Because, oddly enough, that deck is pretty good against other aggressive matchups.
Yeah, you do have to look at it from the other side now as well, because the people who are most experienced with and against Subject 9 Hunter are the people who brought Subject 9 Hunter, because it came out of nowhere. So now APAC seeing these deck lists go out, they know that they have 3 or 4 days now to prepare for Subject 9 Hunter if they don't know that matchup already. So that might push the win rate of it down a couple of percentage points, but honestly, it's not a deck where you really stop them doing what they want to do if they line things up. It's one of those real power spike decks that's just trying to do stuff on their side of the board and make you react to it.
Yeah, and the thing I like about it is that it's got game against just about everything, because it can still just play late game if your early game doesn't work out.
Yeah.
Because you could still play Spellstone on 5 and just blow people out.
Yeah.
That's kind of what it is.
Yeah. But it's an interesting deck, and I'm curious to see how it's going to perform because of how much it's represented, and curious to see. I think Death Rattle Hunter is still going to struggle because either people just brought aggressive decks that are more refined, or they brought control lineups that just have a little bit more edge against Death Rattle Hunter. Like we saw a lot of those Priests, which Psychic Scream just wrecks that deck a lot of the time.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of Psychic Screams this weekend. And I think as a result, maybe that one deck that we keep underestimating, at least I do, Tempo Mage, might have an opportunity to sneak in there, because some people are going full greed, and then Tempo Mages are being more represented, and perhaps that gives you an opportunity to squeeze in there.
Good luck playing Mechathune against against
an aggro
mage.
Yeah. All right, so that's what we're looking forward to Asia Pacific. That's going to be this weekend. What time do we start broadcasting, TJ? Is it 7 p.m. Pacific, I believe?
I think it's 7 p.m. Pacific, yeah.
Yeah, so that's going to be twitch.tv/play Hearthstone or other localized region language streams if you guys want to. And it's going to be really fun. I mean, Asia Pacific is also where the caches tend to get a little bit loopy, too.
Yes. Usually it happens last, though. Because of DreamHack Montreal happening on that weekend, we didn't want to line Americas up with DreamHack Montreal since they clash. So APAC's happening second, which is going to be a little bit weird for us, because it's the end of playoffs. We're getting a little bit loopy already, and then we have to reset and go back to Americas. That's going to be weird.
So maybe Americas is the weird casting week.
Yeah, I guarantee you it's going to be fun. And it's different than the playoffs. It's Friday night and Saturday night, 7 p.m. Pacific.
Yes.
Instead of normal Saturday, Sunday like other playoffs are. So
yeah, gamer time, easy.
Gamer time.
You just start late and stay up all night. Easy.
Yeah, love it.
Start preparing today. All right, so that does it for us for this episode. I want to thank my co-host TJ and Sottle for joining us. Obviously, the next time you'll be seeing the gang will be this weekend at HCT Asia Pacific for the Fall Playoffs. Is there anything else you guys wanted to say?
Well, we, of course, have another special episode of TalkStone next week,
that's right.
Which is the Asia Pacific version, where we'll break down that. We will be joined by Raven next week.
Budget Sottle.
That's right.
Budget Sottle, sure.
Sottle will be in a coma from his euphoria of being right in predictions again, so he can't join us. Actually, that's something we didn't talk about a little bit. How TJ was so you weren't here, Sottle, but maybe you heard it on the podcast. TJ for several episodes kept talking about he was a prediction champion. He told the story so many times of how he had 2 trophies on his desk and he took one home for himself because you didn't have. And now you get to be in studio to kind of respond back. So for the final send-off or final notes here, Sottle.
I've deliberately chosen not to bring this up because honestly, results speak for themselves. And when you do only sneak out one win, of course you're going to harp on it over and over and over again every time you can. But I have no need to do that. You just have to check the record books.
Agreed.
You don't make it fun, TJ, if you don't fight back.
I take him where I can get him, Dan. That's winning once was perfectly enough for me.
Yeah, that's right. It's just drawing blood for the first time against the god, right?
Yeah.
All right, well, thank you, everyone, for listening. If you guys want more TalkStone, again, TJ mentioned that for the Fall Playoff Special, we're going to do week to week, 6 p.m. Pacific, twitch.tv/playhearthstone, and then we'll go back to our regular cadence of every other week. You can also find us on SoundCloud, iTunes, and Google Play for the audio-only version of the podcast in case you're going for a commuter drive or just want to listen casually while playing some Hearthstone. If you guys want anything else related to Hearthstone esports news, analysis, and articles, check out playhearthstone.com/esports. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the tavern.